Welcome back to the Spiritually Inspired Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on another wonderful Friday filled with manifesting, mindfulness, and magic. My name is Sarah Ray. I am your manifesting coach. I'm going to help you break through your manifesting ceiling. On this podcast, we explore the world of metaphysics so we can discover our own spiritual truths. So take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and always dig deeper. If you enjoy the show, please consider liking and rating wherever you happen to be listening so we can reach more modern mystics with spiritual awesomeness. Yes. Today, I am joined by the lovely Candy Washington of the Sugar Pills podcast, a practical guide to self-care. And we're going to be talking about the ever important topic of self-forgiveness. She is a wellness entrepreneur, a writer, an actor, a producer, all the things. And I'm very excited to welcome her here. So thank you for joining us today, Candy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I often talk about forgiveness on this podcast in many different capacities. I tell so many people and clients that forgiveness will set them free. I find that this is like the most important piece of information that people need to hear, but it's tricky for a lot of people to do this. So I kind of want to talk about a little bit about what makes it scary, and let's make it less scary because we're talking about it in the context of self-forgiveness, not forgiving other people because that's a whole other beast. But we're talking about self-forgiveness here. So before we dive in, how about you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your spiritual journey?
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Sarah. I'm Candy Washington, and my personal and professional purpose is to add value to the lives of others through storytelling. And I do that through my podcast, Sugar Pills, A Practical Guide to Self-Care. I also write books and do films and digital content and courses and all of that fun stuff, which is great. But I think that the most important story I will ever share is my own. And when I really understood that, that's when I started my own self-care and spiritual journey. When I realized I was very much a codependent personality, had really hard time creating healthy boundaries with other people, telling people no. And I was really lacking in self-esteem, but I would never have known that. If you would have asked me years ago, are you a confident person? I'd like, of course I'm confident. I have this and this and I'm doing that. But it was all rooted in, I'm doing this because I feel like I need to get my worth, value, and lovability out of what I do. It was all outside of me is where I was getting my purpose and my value from. So my spiritual journey shifted when I realized I'm intrinsically valuable and lovable and worthy. I was born enough, I was born in my divinity. I don't have to show, prove, or do anything. I want these things because I deserve them. I don't want to get these things in order to be deserving of them. And when I got that shift, that was really what set me on my own spiritual path of I am worthy and I'm enough as is. And from that place, let me create a life that I love and let me attract the people that, share in that light and I share in theirs. So that's kind of where I was at.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. Finding that feeling of love and worthiness and confidence is actually what cultivates the change, not the other way around. And
exactly.
That's a mind-blowing revelation for a lot of people. So it's huge and very important to get that out there. And, there does come a level of self-forgiveness with that. You mentioned how you thought you were confident and you realized that you really weren't. I find almost all of my clients think that they're worthy when realize with doing some of this inner work, they realize that they have a lot of self-worth issues. And a lot of it stems from not being gentle and forgiving towards themselves. So just because you think something doesn't mean that it actually is, or a lot of it is a defense mechanism, especially if you reply quickly. Like, I am confident, I am worthy. Absolutely. That's not a problem. Like, the things you resist the most are what you need to work on the most.
Exactly. Sure. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So why forgiveness?
So to me, forgiveness really is the power to disconnect your perceived mistake or failure or whatever you want to call it from your identity. And I think that's really what the power of forgiveness is. It's saying I may have done something that I perceived to be wrong or wasn't right, either to myself or to others, or sometimes the biggest mistakes that we think are like, I should have did that job, or I should have went this way, or I should have taken this path. And because I didn't, somehow I'm stuck, or I'm not where I should be, right? It's a lot of shoulding on yourself.
Oh,
You know,
I hate that word.
I should be here. I should have this.
Yeah.
If I had only done, 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 done. And
Mhm.
if we don't forgive ourselves for the perceived mistake or the perceived misstep, then we start to equate our mistake with who we are. And that's the difference between guilt and shame. And
Mhm.
forgiveness frees you of that. So, guilt is actually a very healthy thing to feel. Guilt is a signal, it's an emotion saying, hey, your action is not in alignment with your morals and your values. So, you feel guilty. But guilt is something that you feel bad about what you did. Shame is what I did makes me a bad person.
Mhm.
I made a mistake, therefore I am a mistake. I tried to do something and it failed, therefore I am a failure. You know, I should have went that way when I should have done this. And since I didn't do that, then I'm not worthy of success. I'm not worthy of love. It's never going to work out for me, because you equate what you did or didn't do, or what someone did or didn't do to you or for you, to who you are. And that's why shame is so toxic, because it makes you feel, it makes you identify that somehow you're a mistake and you're a failure and you're not good enough. So
Absolutely.
forgiveness is saying, I'm not going to identify with my mistakes. I'm not going to identify with my trauma. I'm not going to identify with what I have done or what other people have done to me, because that's not really who I am. Those are just circumstances that have happened or have not happened. So forgiving yourself disconnects you from identifying with it. And then I also think redefining what forgiveness is. Like, I think self-forgiveness is accepting your humanity in a compassionate way. Accepting that you are, in my personal opinion, a spiritual being having a human experience.
Mhm.
And a part of that human experience is that you're not going to be perfect. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to mess up. Sometimes you're going to self sabotage. Sometimes you're going to not get it right. But that's a part of what the journey is. That's a part of how you get wisdom. That's a part of how you learn. That's a part of how you grow. That's a part of how you cultivate resiliency. So I think when you redefine what forgiveness is, you know what? I'm going to accept my humanity. I'm going to accept that, you know what? Sometimes I'm not going to get it right. Sometimes I am going to mess up. Sometimes I am going to regret stuff. Sometimes I am going to feel guilt. But I can hold space for myself in a compassionate way and let it go. And then the second part of forgiveness is trusting also in your own divinity. That, sure, the human part of me can make a mistake. That's fine. But the divine part of me is always still here. And that worthiness, that intrinsic value, that intrinsic lovability, that intrinsic value of who I am does not waver or change, whether or not I make a mistake, or whether or not something happens, whether or not I fail, or whether or not someone does or does not do something for me. It's inherent, it's intrinsic, and it's divine. Nothing can give it, therefore nothing can take it. So I think that's really what forgiveness is about. It's holding your humanity, accepting who you are, and in a compassionate way, and then freeing up the space for your divinity to come in and take care of you no matter what is happening. And
Yeah.
it's and what forgiveness is not is absolving responsibility and
Yes.
accountability, because you still
Yes.
have consequences and you're still responsible for how you show up for yourself, since it's self forgiveness and self-awareness and all of that stuff, and how you act. And there still may be consequences for your actions, but those consequences still cannot take away from your inherent worthiness, because you no longer identify with it. You can look at it outside of yourself, if that makes sense.
Right. It's like you're shifting your identity from that of
Hmm.
the ego, which clings to
Exactly.
mistakes, and you're shifting it over to your soul self, your
Hmm.
subconscious mind, however you want to view it, because that is closer to the universe, while the ego is closer to your humanity. We need both
Hmm.
these things, and it's okay if you've ever felt shame or you've ever had this identity to your ego mind.
Yeah.
But making that shift really is so empowering and so important on your spiritual journey. You really can't grow as a human being if you think every single mistake you've ever made deteriorates your self-worth, right? And this
Yeah.
is, I keep bringing this up here, is the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset.
Mhm.
You have a degree in psychology, I believe, right? So you had
Philosophy.
philosophy. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure you've still heard of this,
Yes.
where the
Yes.
idea of where I am stagnant and I'm permanent. Therefore, if I make a mistake, it means I'm lesser than somebody who didn't make the mistake. Well, the
Mhm.
growth mindset is more in alignment with your soul self, in my opinion, where you can grow to be anything and you're meant to grow. I also really appreciate the different definitions between guilt and shame.
Yes.
That's just really invaluable information. Guilt is when you realize that what the situation was and how you reacted to it is not in alignment with your divine purpose, your divine truth, what you
Mhm.
believe. And shame is when you, that same scenario, except it's bringing you down.
Yeah.
Whether, and more often than not, it's coming from outside yourself, but you can do this to yourself too. You shame yourself so well, like every day we all shame, especially in the adolescent age group. They're really good
Mhm.
at this. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's basically the difference of I did something wrong versus I am wrong.
Yeah.
There's something
Right.
wrong with me. That's really what the difference is. And I love that you brought up, a fixed mindset versus a growth or an abundant mindset. And I think it's also just as cliche as it is, thinking, is life happening to me or is life happening for me?
Yes.
And when you have that perspective, anything can happen, good, bad, dark, light, whatever it is. And you can show up from the perspective of, how is this happening for me? And then when you get to that point, you can say, well, maybe I made this mistake, or maybe I did this wrong thing in order for this to open up, in order for me to learn this about myself. Sometimes it's as simple as, guess what? I effed up and I'm still here. Sometimes we just need that reminder that, guess what? This still didn't break me. I'm still here. I'm still in the present moment. I can still make a change right now. I can think a different thought. I can do a different thing. My life isn't over. Maybe I need to just, lighten up a little bit and know that I'm still here. And
Yeah.
that is enough. Where there is life, there is hope. So as long as you're still here, this mistake that you're allowing to get at you really isn't that big. It kind of takes away its power. It takes away its bigness. But you can kind of look at yourself with curiosity of, how is this happening for me? Just with a curious thought. How is this happening for me? I'm open to looking at the situation for, how did it happen for me? Because sometimes you never know what you're being protected from. Sometimes we let, like, oh, if I would have only taken that job, or if I wouldn't have broken up with that person, I would be married by now, or whatever you think it is. And you don't think that those things that you need to forgive yourself for, but it's those things that haunt you is when you have to forgive yourself and just say, you know what? I did the best I could in that moment. I made the best choice from where I was in that moment. And I'm just going to allow myself to know and believe that I was being guided, even if I don't see it, even if I don't know it. And I'm choosing to redefine how I look at this. And I forgive myself for ever thinking that it had to be different than what it was.
Yeah. And the happy side effect of that, that's
Mhm.
totally a byproduct, is less anxiety.
Yeah.
Because anxiety is that like fear of the mistake, of the worst
Yeah.
happening and not being able to move on from it. But when you live your supposed worst case scenario and you forgive the situation, you forgive yourself for getting to that point and you go, wow, I am pretty strong. Look at what I was able to handle. Your
Yeah.
anxiety has less of a leg to stand on because you've proven to yourself that you can come out the other side and you're not identifying with that result, which is really important. Um,
Mhm.
what you were just saying about how you take a look at different scenarios in a new perspective
Yeah.
made me think of people in victim mentality versus people who are empowered to take responsibility, because we all know
Mhm.
that the person stuck in a fixed mindset thinks that forgiveness is saying that what you did is okay, whether it's outside you or you're doing it to yourself. And that's
Mm.
not the case at
No.
all, right? We're not absolving responsibility,
Right.
but in a growth mindset, you learn from your mistake. So when you aren't able to learn from your mistake because you're stuck in victimhood, how do you forgive from that standpoint?
I think, well, I think first it starts with self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because if you are not aware that you're in your victimness, then you're not going to be able to get from this is all happening to me. I can't forgive myself because it means it's okay and blah, 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 blah. So I would say if someone is stuck in their victimness, we need to get them to a point of awareness. So I think journaling is really good, where I do different journaling prompts where it's like the first time I felt like I wasn't worthy of forgiveness was when dun 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 dun. If I actually allowed myself to forgive myself for X, Y, and Z, what would that actually mean? Or what do I think would happen? Because there's a lot of things going on in our subconscious mind that we consciously aren't aware of that's hindering us from getting to the point of, wow, you know what? I am kind of stuck in my own victimhood. Sure, I made this, mistake, or I did something wrong in this one moment, this event, but now I'm suffering because I'm letting that one event or that one thing continuously bring me down through my own thoughts,
Mhm.
because we make a mistake, but we suffer from the mistake in our own minds. So it's like getting clarity of your own victimhood, because if you don't realize that you're stuck in shaming yourself and blaming yourself and criticizing yourself and thinking that, woe is me and everything, you can't get to that better headspace. So the first part is creating the awareness of, whoa, I think that if I forgive myself, it means, what I did was okay, or that it'll happen again. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we hang on to stuff because we have the fear that if I let this go, if I forget it, if I forgive it, it'll happen again. But
Mhm.
the truth is, if you let it go, if you forgive it, if you have the awareness of why it happened for you, then you can take that wisdom, that lesson and experience and apply it next time. So that not that it happens again, but that you can meet that same moment or that same decision or that same event from a new level of awareness and consciousness and self-compassion and understanding. So you don't forgive yourself because you're saying what you did was okay. You forgive yourself because you're a human being and things sometimes happen. You're a human being and you're going through this experience and journey. So your awareness, your consciousness, the level of where you are will be changing. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. And you did the best you could from where you were, and that's okay.
Yeah. You
And that's
basically just
okay.
it is. You just described the process of spiritual growth.
Yeah.
Like, in a nutshell, well, there is a level of not being aware, which is where we're
Yeah.
stuck in our victimhood, where
Hmm.
life is just happening around us,
Yeah.
and then we increase our levels of self-awareness, and because of karma, the
Hmm.
situation will happen again. It will show up
Exactly.
in some form. So
Yeah.
are you going whether you forgive or not, it's gonna happen again. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the kicker. So if you don't forgive, you kind of have this opportunity to be delightfully in a worse off position. Like, where
Yeah.
you, like, are in, like, "Oh, here we go again. This is gonna happen. This always happens." And then you're comfortable there, like, on a subconscious level, or
Hmm.
you can take the situation, recognize, and be like, "Hey, this is what happened last time. I'm gonna do something different this time."
Yeah.
And that's how we grow.
100%. And it also gives you the power of choice. Like
Yeah.
people don't realize that, like, if you forgive yourself and you have the awareness, then you empower yourself to make a decision next time. Then you're not stuck on autopilot. You're not stuck on just your own subconscious limiting belief loop. That's
Yeah.
when people get into patterns and people get into trauma loops and all of that stuff where it's just you're working on autopilot and you're not actually stopping and saying, hey, I have the choice to show up differently in this situation. Because last time this happened, X, Y, and Z happened. And instead of saying I am wrong and I am bad and I'm not good enough and I'm unworthy and blah, 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 and the whole world is just happening to me, I decided that, you know what? I'm worthy, I'm enough, and I'm valuable. I'm a human being. I made a mistake. This is what I learned. You know what? Universe, God, whatever you want to call it, is now giving me a chance to apply my healing, to
Yes.
apply my wisdom, to apply my new level of consciousness to another example of that. It's just like at school, you take a test in order to progress to the next level. And on that test is everything you've learned for the last year. So that test is going to be everything you went through before. But this time, the test is, will you show up differently? And when you
Hallelujah.
show up differently is when you are empowered with, I decide how I react and respond to something. Well,
Mhm.
respond rather than react. Because if you're in react mode, you're stuck in that loop of just happening
Yes.
over and over and over and over again. But when you say, I have the power to decide how I respond to this, and sometimes it's not even just not making the mistake, it's actually making the same exact mistake, but how do I respond to myself is what is different.
Mhm.
Oh, I made the same exact mistake again, but you know what? I'm not going to criticize myself. I'm not going to put myself down. I'm not going to sabotage myself anymore. I'm not going to take a whole year in depression. I'm not going to take a whole year stuck in anxiety. I'm not going to think it's not going to get there. I'm going to say, you know what? I made the same mistake. It happens. Okay, I love myself. I forgive myself. Next time I'll do better because I know better. Next. So
Yeah.
it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up and accepting your humanity in a compassionate way.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we make the same mistake. But
Yeah.
how you show up for yourself, to me, is where the healing is.
Yes. Because like you said, this ego reacts, the
Yep.
soul responds.
Responds.
And I find that people who are stuck in reaction mode do this with everybody, not just themselves. So the people
Yeah.
who can't forgive themselves truly can't forgive other people. And
Mhm.
so they're like really harsh judgments. It's very black and white. And then they treat themselves that way too. So there comes the old adage where hurt people hurt people. And then
100%.
and then we talk about how the soul responds, where
Mhm.
you're like, wow, you just nothing phases you, nothing or everything slides off your back. Like I've been told that before. You're so chill. And I'm like, no, I
Mhm.
just not only do I pick and choose my battles, I would never yell at myself in this way that you are
Mhm.
expecting me for some reason. So why do you think that I'm gonna do that to somebody else? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Eh,
it is
eh,
a really big shift to make. Yeah.
it's a big shift, and I also think what came up when you were talking is like, I think when you also start to elevate and awaken and like return home to your higher
Yeah.
self, you get really, I call it precious. I get really precious about my energy. So that isn't worth my energy. Like, you're not going to get a reaction. You're not going to get anything because I am so precious about my energy because it's so warm and it's so powerful, and I just love it, and I really cultivate it and I care about it, and it's mine, and it's so powerful. So why am I going to give away my warm, powerful energy on something that doesn't really matter and doesn't really serve me?
Right.
So I'm very precious about my attention and my energy, and very, very discerning about what and who is worth it and what isn't.
Right. And you clinging to shame and guilt, not worth it.
Not worth it. Not worth it. Well, I think guilt is okay,
Yes,
but
we
when
don't want
you
to cling.
but when you wallow in the guilt, it
Yes,
becomes the shame. Because
exactly.
then you because to me, guilt is a good emotion because it's an indicator to you, hey, you know what? You're doing something that's not in alignment with your higher self. You're doing something that's not in alignment with your morals and your values. You're doing
Yes.
something that's not actually in alignment with the vision and the goals you have for yourself. Maybe it could even be you're self-sabotaging, you don't even realize it, or you have a moral compass and you're kind of getting out of it a little bit, you know what I mean? And that feeling of guilt is like, hey, 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 Candy, you're out of integrity, you're out of alignment, you're doing things that's not in alignment with who you really are.
Yeah.
So guilt's fine, but when you wallow in the guilt and you start to identify with the wrongness or the mistake or the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and you say, well, what I did makes me a bad person. It makes me not good enough. And then you become ashamed of yourself. That's when it's toxic and that's when it's bad. But we
Yeah.
can use guilt as an indication of, you know what, maybe I need to kind of get my stuff together. Maybe I need
Yep.
to do some journaling. Maybe I need to meditate. Maybe I need to pray. Maybe I need to talk to my therapist. Maybe I need to just, get it together.
Yep.
I need to get it
Express
together.
it in some way. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just some sort of reflection. Because, like you
Yeah.
said, without that reflection, it becomes a detriment to my value as a human being and a soul. So we've
Mhm.
been kind of talking mostly about really big picture things. Like we're
Sure.
talking deep traumas,
Mm.
we're talking huge mistakes typically, like things that have really big impacts. But I think micro forgiveness
Mhm.
is really important too. We can't just talk about big karmic lessons that we're here to learn, because
Yeah.
those things will continue to show up, right? Like, as we already mentioned. But
Mhm.
there's also minor things that we do during the day or say maybe that aren't in alignment.
Yeah.
And we have that little moment of guilt. So is forgiveness different for the big things as
Mhm.
it is for the really tiny things?
No, I don't think so. And I think what it is if it's cultivating a base foundation of a loving relationship to yourself. Because if you have that base foundation of, and I like to call it a loving mental lifestyle.
I love that.
It's like a loving mental lifestyle. I've heard other people call it like a strict mental diet, and I'm like, oh, I'm not
Sure.
dieting. I don't want anything strict. Blech, get out of
Yeah,
here.
no, structure, no thank you.
No, thank you. You know what I mean? I don't know, because words matter and energy matters, right? So I like, if you're cultivating a loving mental lifestyle towards yourself, and what I mean by that is, what is your inner dialogue? That is the most important thing. How do you talk to yourself and about
Yes,
yourself?
absolutely.
So if you're cultivating a loving mental lifestyle towards yourself, then the little things throughout the day don't become the big things that we're talking about. So, like, if you make a little mistake, like, for example, if you say you are running late to something that's really important and you're like, oh no, I'm messing up and I can't find my keys. And notice in your mind, because in the grand scheme of things, it's a little thing, right? But in your mind, you're saying, oh, I'm so stupid. I'm always late. Nothing works out for me. Of course, this happens to me. I'm going to show up and they're going to think I'm a stupid. Is that where you go? To that place of criticalness and judgment and putting yourself down? Or do you go to, you know what, I'm always on time? There's a little prayer I always say if I like can't find something. I'm just like, God, thank you for revealing to me where my keys are. God, thank you for showing me that the issue of me not finding my keys is now resolved. And I promise you it works. And then they'll be like, boom, right there. And I'm feeling good. I'm feeling supported. I'm feeling guided. And I'm on my way. So I think with the little things is just practice having that base foundation of having a loving mental lifestyle towards yourself. So you walk past the mirror and you say, oh my God, I have another pimple. I'm so fat. I need to lose 10 pounds. Why don't I have this? I don't have that. Or do you walk by the mirror and you're like, girl, you're looking good today. Yes. I see you, girl. Yes, you gotta work. I am all this. One thing I do is if I find myself like just being on autopilot in my mind, worrying about something or being down on myself, I just stop and I just say, I love you, Candy. I love you, Candy. I love you, Candy. And it gets me back on track. Or I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. And it brings me back home. It brings me back to center. But all at the core, it's just mindfulness.
Yes.
Being aware and observing, how do I talk to myself about myself? Because
Mhm.
that's really the base level of all of it. Because if you have a base level of, I'm worthy, I'm enough, I love myself, it's good, everything's working out for me, everything is happening for me, I got this, I'm always right on time, I always meet the right people, this is always going to work out for me, I'm always divinely guided. If you just have that running in the back of your mind, if you make that shift, that subconscious shift, then when you have the little minor things throughout the day that happens where you could have defaulted to feeling bad about yourself, criticizing yourself, you take it, it's a much lighter, again, with the curiosity part. Like, I wonder why that happened, or oh my goodness. Like, I remember the other day, this is a true story. I don't know why. I just didn't turn on any lights in my bedroom. I don't know why. And I was just like, I wasn't being mindful. I was like rushing. I was playing, and I turned around and I knocked myself dead in the head. And I got this
Oh.
huge egg on my head from the door crack. And instead of being like, oh my God, you're so stupid. You have this huge bump on your head. Why didn't you turn the light on? I was like, oh my goodness, look at this thing. All right, next time I'll turn the light on. Because I cultivate a compassionate, light, curious, loving relationship to myself. And to me, that's the essence of self-love.
Yeah.
Cultivating a compassionate, curious, loving relationship to yourself. And that in the relationship you have with yourself, just like you said, it's the foundation for the relationship you have with everybody else.
Yeah.
How you treat yourself is how other people treat you. How you treat yourself is how you treat other people. Sometimes it's actually even like I don't know what the word is, like the opposite or the foil to it. Because sometimes if you treat yourself really bad and you're like, you don't make time for yourself, you don't have any boundaries, you do the extreme to the other person where you overgive and you overdo everything and you always
For
say
sure.
yes to them, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's even that way, but it's still how you're treating yourself is how you're treating other people. Because what you're saying to yourself is, my time isn't as valuable. I'm not good enough. I need this person to validate me. I need this person to
Yeah.
accept me. If I actually show up as who I am, I'm so fearful I'm going to be abandoned and left and unlovable. And then that's just going to prove to me that I'm not good enough because that's what I already think about myself.
Right. Right. And then
You
your
know?
brain is subconsciously looking for outside validation for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That
So I think that's what it really is. And when you have that foundation with the little stuff, then it doesn't snowball into the bigger stuff.
yeah. Right. Because then at that point, the big stuff truly is the big stuff.
It really is
Right.
the big stuff. Yeah.
Right. Like childhood memories,
Mhm.
implications, big relationships,
Yeah.
karmic things, not just everyday self-value, which is
100%.
yeah.
And usually the big stuff, like the childhood trauma, all of that stuff that happens is is what's the word I'm looking for? Is what is determining or is what is influencing
Mhm.
how we deal with the minor stuff.
Absolutely.
Because if in childhood trauma we learned you have to be perfect or you're stupid or you're dumb or however you perceived it, because sometimes things people say or events that happened in our little child minds that are just trying to keep us safe, we make different inferences about what they mean, right? So if we infer that it's my fault or I'm not good enough or I have to be this way or X or this is what always happens to me or we never have enough or we have too much and people have too much are evil or this or whatever it is, then you apply that same mindset, those same set of beliefs to the small stuff. So
Mhm.
then the reason why you're saying, oh my God, I forgot my keys. And of course I forgot my keys because this is what happens to me. I'm someone who's always late. Nothing works out, blah, 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 blah. Because those beliefs about yourself that got set into childhood is what is actually influencing your belief now about the minor thing. Because your
Mhm.
belief system is what shows up for the small things and the big things.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
shifting that belief system. I know people say you have to reprogram your mind. I don't believe in reprogramming. I believe in shifting. I'm
Yeah.
shifting from one belief set of not good enough, unworthiness, perfectionism, self-sabotage, trauma, blah, 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 all of that stuff, to shifting into my higher self of I am good enough, I am worthy, I'm intrinsically valuable, I'm allowed to make mistakes, I'm a human being, but I'm still connected to my divinity, I'm still worthy and enough, that's intrinsic and inherent, whatever it is. You're shifting your mindset, you're shifting your perspective, right?
Yeah.
So it's about the shifting to a new level of thinking about yourself, shifting to a new level of consciousness, shifting to a new perspective, shifting into a new way that you meet things in your life, shifting a new way where you meet yourself in your life and other people and events and everything. It's a shift. But it all starts with awareness of, whoa, I sabotage myself because of this. I don't forgive myself because of that. And it usually just goes into what is your belief system about who you are.
Yeah. I absolutely agree, and
Yeah.
I tell people that every single day. It really
Yeah,
is, like, you need to work on your self-awareness, and you do that by
100%.
meditating, you do that by self-reflecting and journaling,
Hmm.
like you mentioned, we talked about all of that, and also looking at how you treat others, 'cause
Yeah.
you mentioned that that's just a really good place to start, so I know you have a lot of awesomeness going on right now,
Oh,
so
thank
how
you.
about you take a moment to tell us a little bit more about where we can find you and connect with you a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to connect with me, just head over to my website. It's candywashington.com. And there you can find my podcast, Sugar Pills, A Practical Guide to Self-Care. I've also started doing a lot of self-love and lifestyle design courses. So you can find the Art of Self-Love Masterclass, the More Than Enough course, and the Create Your Dream Life course. And you can find all that there. And I also have a free self-love guide. And you can join our newsletter once you grab the free guide. So we have a ton of stuff going on there. And then also on YouTube, I do a lot of videos and coaching on there. And that's just at Candy Washington as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much, Candy, for being here. This has been a lot of
Yeah.
really awesome information to just kind of soak in and digest. I think this is one of those where you're going to have to come and listen a couple times to really get all the good stuff. And it's one of
Yeah,
those things that you continue practicing, you continue doing, and you continue shifting. So, yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah Ray. This is
Yes.
amazing.
Thank you for having or for coming on. I wasn't thank you for having me on my own podcast. Thank you for
You're
coming on
welcome.
to this podcast.